Howdy folks, we're looking at Edge Magazine issue 29 already. This one released February 1996. It says 1995, but I'm telling you it's 1996. And indeed, the future of interactive entertainment. In this case, we see the Nintendo 64 on the cover. I don't know what the Japanese words say, but there's a lot of talk about the Nintendo 64, which was going to be released soon in Japan and later in the year in the West. So here we see a little cutout, and I believe you can make it. So you cut it out, you fold the lines, and then you get an elephant. Is Nintendo the elephant in this case? I don't know. So yeah, there's some talk about how realistic it is for the Nintendo 64 to, at the time, stick to games made by the Dream Team instead of having everybody making games for Nintendo 64. And that turned out to work less well than what the PlayStation did. Because even with Rare and Nintendo making excellent games, PlayStation had just all these different companies making games for them. And it's such a shame that Nintendo didn't get Capcom on time. And Konami did make ISS, yeah, but still, I don't know. With games like Final Fantasy and Metal Gear Solid being on the PlayStation and not on the Nintendo 64, it was going to be hard to compete. Okay, so we see Tenka, the game. Old 64, we have Chris Crawford, one of my favorite people in the video game industry. I'll get back to him later. So, yeah, there was apparently this show where the Nintendo 64 was shown, including 2 games, and a lot of demos, but only 2 games you could play, and people were amazed by Mario 64. So, here you have Miyamoto playing his own game. Let's see. We have another 3D card being released. This is the time of 3D cards. This one especially made for a Virtual Fighter, it seems. And the Neo Geo, the second version of their CD system, which would have twice the loading speeds, which would help significantly. Okay, apparently people are still doing virtual reality in 1996. I thought it was dead by then, especially considering the Jaguar had flopped. But yeah, these are for more like, you know, shows and stuff, less for home computing. Okay, some book called I Sing the Body Electronic. I read this magazine about a week ago, and it's been very busy, and I thought, I'll just, take a look at it, and I thought I'd remember more than I have. But can't comment on that, unfortunately. One writer says, yeah, we should use Mortal Kombat 3 as the standard to see if the Saturn or the PlayStation is stronger, but of course, that's not what it's about. It's about the most strongest games. And, yeah, why hasn't Edge covered Phoenix 3 for the 3DO? Well, the reason Edge says because it's not interesting, it's crap. So, and another reader confused, saying, hey, I bought Next Generation, and a lot of the articles were the same as an Edge. Well, this magazine lasted a couple of years in the United States, and it's basically Edge, but the American version. And I've never seen it up close, but as you can see by the layout, it's kind of the same idea. A lot of interviews with professionals. And I could really tell that around 1996, Edge magazine started becoming much more American-centric. Like you have Chris Crawford in this issue. They really broadened their scope thanks to working with Next Generation. Because the first 3 years they were mainly focused on what was happening in England. Still quite a lot, but back then it was really lopsided. And Next Generation helped Edge become a better magazine. And unfortunately, this only lasted for 5 years or so. And turned out to be quite a big thing in the United States. But yeah, Americans don't read magazines like they do in England. Okay, so yeah, news groups. This is a kind of a funny article about how yeah, all the discussions going on the internet and how it's like a cacophony of repeated discussions. Nevertheless, a lot of things are said. So they cut out like this discussion about the Nintendo 64, which I find somewhat hilarious. They treat it like it's a whole different world. Well, nowadays we go to YouTube and we see these kind of discussions all the time. It's a part of our daily life. But back then it was a whole new subculture. And they actually go to these different use groups, Usenet places. So a bit more for one more time. I didn't get that much into the internet because I didn't have a computer that could use it well until around 1997 or so. So here's Tenka, a game released for the PlayStation 1, and apparently it had very sharp graphics, but other than that it was a very normal looking, normal playing first-person shooting game made by Synosys, and I was surprised there wasn't more information to be found on the game on the web. This is, however, an article about the graphical possibilities of the PlayStation 1 in this game. Manx Tt, yet another racing game made by Sega for arcades. I don't know if this one made it to the Saturn. Here's an interview with its maker. Here we have Timegate. As you could probably see, it's by the same people who made Alone in the Dark. Unfortunately, this game wasn't that good. And you can't tell that by reading the preview. They're all very excited about this. But later on, we would find out that Timegate just wasn't up to the new standard set by Alone in the Dark. Now here's an interesting game, Sentient. I should definitely do some research on this game. I know it wasn't well received because it didn't work out that well, but it was a first-person role-playing game, which at the time was quite rare. And you could start your own kind of discussions. Look, you have like, ask a question, make a statement, give a command, offer greetings, say again. So you could really talk with the NPCs, and I wonder how they did that in the end. Pez Dragoon Zwei, the sequel to the first, and I don't know much about this game, but I read that you start as a baby dragon or something. Civilization 2, I played a lot of that as a kid, and what can I say, it's a lot like Civilization 1. Most of the fundamental rules are the same, but the extra units give it, I guess, more depth. I mean, some of the things were kind of lacking in Civilization 1, and yeah, you can't use chariots as aggressively as in Part 1, so it's a bit smarter. It's definitely better than Part 1, although all the extra things do make games a bit longer. 2 Tenkaku, I don't know about this game, but yet another side-scrolling shoot-'em-up. And here's Horned Owl, a on-rail shooting game, kind of like Virtual Cop, and I remember this game not getting good reviews. Doom being released for the PlayStation. So Intel. So the star of this issue is Mario 64. And what can I say about this? These are alpha builds. You see that Bill looks a little bit different. And Mario has a different face at the top left. But it looks kind of like it. And they love it how at the beginning you could just walk around and jump and fall in water and learn how to move around the 3D area. There's even talk about something like an owl. Yeah, they talk about how an owl would pull you around. I don't remember that happening in the game. Now, I've never been a big fan of Super Mario 64 because I just didn't like the controls. Nor did I actually like what you were doing. You were just looking for stars. But I don't recall seeing an owl, but I could be wrong. Yeah, I loved Super Mario Bros. 3 and Super Mario World and Yoshi's Island because I love the level design, but 3D Mario just doesn't tickle me. Okay, Star Fox 64 being shown. Body Harvest will not be released for another while, but kind of like Grand Theft Auto at the time. Buggy Boogie? No, I don't remember that one. Star Wars. The first level's awesome, the rest is kind of bland. Wave Race would be really cool. Mario Kart R at the time would be called 64. What's Buggy Boogie? You recognize this? Angel Studios? Well, maybe we'll find out later on. So these are all demos. Kirby Bowl 64 was the other game you can play, and nobody seemed to like it. Blastozer would, of course, be the game by Rare, Blast Corps. Very original. And there's GoldenEye. At the time, no. It was already a first-person shooter game. Because once upon a time, this game was more like Virtual Cop than anything else. But it eventually evolved into the first-person adventure game we got to know. But some levels you can still see that influence, that you are on a rail, just shooting at things. And of course there's Zelda 64. None of this would make its way into the end game, but this was some kind of fight with a skeleton of sorts. Yeah. And at the time people thought it would be for the DD extension, the CD drive for the Ultra 64. Okay. Another ad. Hey, it's Miyamoto. An extensive interview with him. First the show. Yeah. Showing off the new controller, how you can stick in the memory card, and who knows what else. Oh yeah, there's a very interesting interview with somebody who works for Silicon Graphics, and one of the coolest questions is, aren't you afraid about the M2 by 3DO? And he says, well, actually I'm not, because we get a lot of applications from people working for M2 if they could work for Silicon Graphics. So yeah, that kind of gives an idea how well that was going already. And yeah, they're talking about the limits of the Ultra 64, and because things are becoming clear that it wasn't going to be able to do everything. One of the biggest problems, of course, is RAM, and but also the size of the cartridges. And he talks, he says how the compression will be enough, and he seems to be quite optimistic about what's going to happen. And of course, what are you going to do with the 3D design? That's going to be tricky. And he's right. But he didn't make games. He only worked on technology. So Miyamoto talking a very light-hearted interview. A lot of fun just reading what they have to say to each other. And Miyamoto kind of jokes like, if you come with me to the hotel, I'll show you 5 other games you can actually play. But Edge actually can't come with him, unfortunately. That would have been really cool. And Miyamoto talks about how Mario games have to be playable for everybody, not only people who used to play the older games. So, and he's learning how to make games in 3D. And yeah, there's a question, what do you think of the Saturn and PlayStation games? And he says they're really good. Although most of them are only arcade conversions. Well, that would eventually change. Howard Lincoln too. I believe he's the Reggie Fils-Aime at the time, and all really optimistic about the games. And he also says that he's enjoying the game thanks to the analog joystick. Apparently, he admits that there are very few video games he enjoys playing, but on the Ultra 64 there would be games he liked. And yeah, there was one question. What about Konami and Capcom and Namco? Why aren't they? And Lincoln says, well, the Dream Team was focused on US and European publishers. I wonder why they chose that. So, and he says they're pleased, but no real specifics given. He's also asked about when the Ultra 64 will be released, and he refuses to comment on that. Oh, I haven't read this interview. This is, I looked at it briefly though. This is somebody who worked on Pilot Wings, and he talks about how he looked at the original Super Nintendo game and wanted to have more freedom in the Ultra 64 version. And he also says how the characters which are in the game, now you can't see them, I don't think this character made it, that they were given by Nintendo. So all that this company really did was just make the physics and the levels, but Nintendo gave all the personality. And growing up on Nintendo Power, I of course loved seeing the character Lark, who looks a lot like Nestor. So that's close to my heart. Yeah, so Piloting 64, the other excellent release. Okay, Ridge Racer Revolution being reviewed. And it gets a 7, I believe. Because it's just not that much of a revolution. It's more of the same. It's more. That's a good start. But still, it's too much of an arcade game. And, yeah. People would need a game like Gran Turismo for at home. Sega Rally was much more revolutionary with fantastic controls. Gets an 8 out of 10. Maybe it should get in a 9. A very good conversion from the Saturn, showing that the Saturn could do 3D. And yeah, one of the best racing games still made of all time. It's become a bit niche now because it's just perfect the way it's been made. I don't believe Sega Rally 2 is any better. So here's In the Hunt, only gets a 4, and it looks like kind of a shooting game, kind of like Galaga and can't come up with the name, R-Type, but it only gets a 4, so probably not worth looking at. Here's The Dig. I don't know how much Steven Spielberg contributed to this game, but this is the LucasArts click and carry adventure that's mostly known for the high production costs and lack of humor. So it's a rather serious story. Gets an 8 out of 10. I heard it sold very well at the time, but time hasn't been very generous to this game like the other LucasArts adventure games. So, yeah, and Edge says there's a lack of humor. But other than that, it's a smart game. Good puzzles. IndyCar Racing 2. I get all these IndyCar games confused, but this one only gets a 5 out of 10. So, I'm going to forget this one. Virtual Cop. Another arcade game for the Saturn. Yeah, it looks pretty cool with all the polygons, although to me it was just still another Lethal Enforcers-like game. I've never been interested in these kind of games. Just remembering what to shoot and all that. Gets a 7 out of 10. Poe Ed. Now this is one of the last 3DO games, and it's Doom, but with a lot of humor, especially kitchen humor. There's a lot of food going around here. You see, I don't know, I think these are chickens with legs or something, or a butt. I don't know. You play a chef, and this character here, and yeah, all the enemies are kind of weird. And other than that, it's apparently a fairly good 3D shoot 'em up. But other than style, it's more the same. So that was the 3DO. This might be the last 3DO game we see in this magazine. Thunderhawk 2 Firestorm. So better than the Thunderhawk on the Sega CD apparently. It gets an 8 out of 10. But I've never heard anything else from this game afterwards. So yeah, I guess if you're looking for a helicopter shooting sim, check it out. X-Men Children of the Atom, the first Marvel fighting game for Capcom, still being made, surprisingly. And this game had you jump really high. That was cool. A lot of characters could fly. A lot of big fireballs going all over the place. Looked fantastic, great animation. I mean, they would continue to use these animations up until Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and it was all good. So this game really showed the power of the CP2 board. And what's not to like? You get to fight with Wolverine against Psylocke. I mean, what's cooler than that? Yeah, and later you get X-Men vs. Street Fighter, which would be the first tag team fighting game made by Capcom, and that would make things even cooler. Namco Museum 1, Galaga, Pac-Man, what else would you expect? And even a version of, what's this? Toy Pulp. I don't know that game. Pole Position. So Namco's greatest games on a CD. A 7 out of 10. And here's a preview on RetroView for Volume 2, which has games like Gapless, which came later, and Xevious, of course. Is that Mappy? Yep. QDQ, I don't know that game. And Dragon Buster, I don't know either. Apparently some role-playing game or something. So, well, we're almost done with the magazine. Here we have advertisements for getting a job. Lots of pretty pictures to entice people to come working for them. Yeah. Is it this cyanosis? Reflections, apparently. FutureNet hoping to get their website. Okay, so you have Chris Crawford. What can I say? Easily at the time the smartest person in the business, understanding what was going on. And he describes himself in this interview like an old man in the desert. And people would like to ignore, but as Chris Crawford says, he's been right too often. If you don't know this guy, he has done a lot. He has done a lot in the industry. He started making games for himself on little computers, microcomputers, and then he worked for Atari in the late 70s, working on the Atari 400 and 800. He started the Game Developers Conference in his backyard. That's how it all started, and he was the director of that for a while until they kicked him out because his ideas weren't commercial enough. And he made fantastic games. One of his biggest hits at the time was Eastern Front in 1981. And he made Excalibur, unfortunately released in 1983, just before the fall of the industry. That game was way ahead of its time. So Eastern Front was probably the best strategy war game at the time. Then Chris Crawford was like, now, enough about things, we need to make games about people. So he made Excalibur, which lets you play the Knights of the Round Table, and you have to make sure everybody likes each other, all the knights, so that you can take over the country. So it's a mix of strategy warfare and keeping people, relationships among people well. Look it up, Excalibur, 1983. You will be amazed at what the game could do in 1983. There was nothing like it. Then in 1985, he released Balance of Power, which was a game where you had to solve the problem of the Cold War. You have to make sure that there wasn't any nuclear fallout. So highly sophisticated. Still a great game to play, and he sold a lot of those games, made him a lot of money, and then he decided to make even more crazier projects. In 1987, he released Seboot, which he's now working on a sequel, which is a game about getting to know aliens and making your way through a society of aliens and saying the right thing. So it's all about people interactions. Didn't sell at all. And then he made a game called Balance of the Planet, which was about how to save the world from, the emissions. Again, way before its time, very well researched, but that didn't sell very well either. And then in 1992, he gave the Dragon speech at the GDC. Check it out on YouTube. Dragon speech, Chris Crawford. It's the coolest speech I've ever seen. And with that, he says, screw you guys. I'm going home. I'm out of here. The industry's become too commercial. The only thing that sells is Wolfenstein 3D. Screw that. We need games where you interact with people, not with guns. And he goes on to spend, well, he's still at it, actually. Well, we'll talk a bit more about his future plans later, but he continues to make something like Seboot, something about people instead of things. And in his interviews, you see a lot of that. He criticizes the industry for only focusing on graphics. He basically says the industry is filling their bras with tissue paper, but in the long run, people are going to see that, and we're going to get another crash or so. Well, that never happened, so in that case, he's wrong. But yeah, he talks about that most reasoning is either spatial or interpersonal, and that games only focus on spatial reasoning. He talks about how Doom only has like 5 verbs: move left, move right, and open doors and shoot things, something like that. And he says, well, you know, that's not very interactive. If you only have those verbs, you're not giving the player much. So, yeah, Chris Crawford way ahead of his time. Again, a very interesting interview, and the cool thing is that at least 3 other interviews will be giving with him and Edge in the next couple of issues. So Chris Crawford has a lot to say. He's written 2 books on video game design and another book on interactive design. And it's still fascinating to follow this guy. And I hope his Patreon becomes a success, although he's not making that much money on it. Oh well, we'll talk more about this guy in the future. So we have the letters. I love this one. Somebody say, hey, maybe with those 4 ports we'll have virtual reality, because, you know, that makes sense, right? Having extra ports will help virtual reality or something, headsets. Now, of course, it's silly. And, yeah, other than that, somebody asking, did these people make this game? Very geeky question. Other than that, no. It's the usual Q&A dribble of uninteresting technical facts. Over the Edge, instead of another preview, we have talk about Michael Jackson playing a game or something. What's most interesting here is Edge chooses the games of their year. Can we focus, maybe? So I'll read them out loud in the meantime. So the best beat 'em up is Tekken. The best platform game is Yoshi's Island. Sports game is Isis Deluxe on the Super Nintendo. Shoot 'em up is Poolstar, the R-Type-like game. Sega Rally is the best driving game. Fate to Black is the best adventure game. Command & Conquer is the best strategy game. Best simulation is Flight Unlimited. Best music is Wipeout, and the best design is also Wipeout. So this is what Edge thought at the time. And yeah, they didn't. Nowadays they have yearly awards issues, but now they just spent 1/10 of a page on that. So here's the elephant you could fold, and here's some music that Edge was listening to during the last year. Morning Glory by Oasis, Different Class with Pulp, Left Field, Leftism. I'm not familiar with that. Okay, and that was Edge Magazine issue 29. Let's look at the whole cover. It's the Nintendo 64. There's some of my Lego collection. Yeah. And next time we'll be doing March 1996, issue 30. So see you then.